I know China very well. China, 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 China.
Now, this is some scary breaking news that I just saw yesterday. Has to be talked about because it could have very serious implications for the very near future, especially as we're on the cusp of a global conflict. Saudi Arabia considers accepting the yuan instead of dollars for Chinese oil sales. Uh-oh. Talks between Riyadh and Beijing have accelerated as the Saudi unhappiness grows with Washington. This is from the Wall Street Journal. Saudi Arabia is in active talks with Beijing to price some of its oil sales to China in yuan. People familiar with the matter said a move that would dent the U.S. dollar's dominance of the global petroleum market and mark another shift by the world's top crude exporter toward Asia. What? I don't know if you don't know much, you're like, oh, you know, they're growing some more ties with China. That seems to be a trend, right? The talks with China over yuan-priced oil contracts have been off and on for 6 years, but have accelerated this year as the Saudis have grown increasingly unhappy with decades-old U.S. security commitments to defend the kingdom, the people said. So the Saudis are in an unhappy marriage, apparently. We don't do enough for them. We're not good enough to them. And they want to now, open up some deal making with China. They want to sell some of their oil in Chinese currency. What's so bad about that, right? You could help the Saudis murder children and they will still turn their backs on you, right? You could be a willing accomplice in murder with someone and they'll still throw you under the bus and look for that sweet Chinese yuan. So unfortunately,
Every day, Zaid al-Humran visits the graveyard where his 2 little boys are buried. Today, he brought their 5-year-old brother along. He's all Zaid has left.
People were screaming out the names of their children. I tried to tell the women it couldn't be true, but then a man ran through the crowd, shouting that a plane had struck the children's bus.
On August 9th, Zaid's son Osama filmed his class on their long-awaited school trip, a reward for graduating summer school. Within hours, and it had all gone horribly wrong. A plane from the US-backed Saudi-led coalition struck a bus carrying them. Dozens died. Some of the bodies were so mutilated, identification became impossible. All that's left are the scraps of school books, warped metal, and a single backpack. Eyewitnesses tell CNN this was a direct hit in the middle of a busy market.
So you can help Saudi Arabia do a genocide to their neighbor, help them bomb school children in busy marketplaces in their school bus, and they will still turn their back on you. Let's learn a little bit more about why oil sales in US dollars versus the Chinese yuan are important. Why Gaddafi had to go. African gold, oil, and the challenge to monetary imperialism. This is from back in 2016, and this is from The Ecologist. What was NATO's violent intervention in Libya really all about? Now we know, writes Ellis Brown. Thanks to Hillary Clinton's recently published emails, it was to prevent the creation of an independent hard currency in Africa that would free the continent from economic bondage under the dollar, the IMF, and the French African franc, shaking off the last heavy chains of exploitation, colonial exploitation. The brief visit of then Secretary of State Hillary Clinton to Libya in October 2011 was referred to by the media as a victory lap. We came, we saw, he died, she crowed in a CBS video interview on hearing of the capture and brutal murder of Libyan leader Muammar Gaddafi.
I mean, that is the land of unconfirmed videos. We came, we saw, he died. Did it have anything to do with your visit? No, I'm sure it did.
Pathetic. She's so pathetic. She's disgusting, but also like trying to tie yourself to someone like a Caesar, like you're some kind of great conqueror. Give me a fucking break. But the victory lap, write Scott Shane and Joe Becker in the New York Times, was premature. Libya was relegated to the back burner by the State Department as the country dissolved into chaos, leading to a civil war that would destabilize the region, fueling the refugee crisis in Europe and allowing the Islamic State to establish a Libyan haven that the United States is now desperately trying to contain, as well as a rat line of Libyan weapons to the moderate rebels in Syria. But that's another story. U.S. NATO intervention was allegedly undertaken on humanitarian grounds after reports of mass atrocities, but human rights organizations questioned the claims after finding a lack of evidence. Today, however, verifiable atrocities are occurring, like open slave markets. There's video of it. You could just go anywhere online and look it up. I've done stories about it. As Dan Kovalik wrote in the Huffington Post, the human rights situation in Libya is a disaster, as thousands of detainees languish in prisons without proper judicial review, and kidnappings and targeted killings are rampant. Before 2011, Libya had achieved economic independence with its own water, its own food, its own oil, its own money, and its own state-owned bank. It had arisen under Gaddafi from one of the poorest countries to one of the richest countries in Africa. Education and medical treatment were free. Hear that, Americans? Having a home was considered a human right, and Libyans participated in an original system of local democracy. The country boasted the world's largest irrigation system, the Great Man-Made River Project, which brought water from the desert to the cities and coastal areas, and Gaddafi was embarking on a program to spread this model throughout Africa. But that was before U.S. NATO forces bombed the irrigation system and wreaked havoc on the country. Today, the situation is so dire that President Obama has asked his advisors to draw up options, including a new military front in Libya, and the Defense Department is reportedly standing ready with the full spectrum of military operations required. The Secretary of State's victory lap was indeed premature if what we're talking about is the officially stated goal of humanitarian intervention. But her newly released emails reveal another agenda behind the Libyan war. And this one, it seems, was achieved. Mission accomplished? Of the 3,000 emails released from Hillary Clinton's private email server in late December 2015, about a third were from her close confidant Sidney Blumenthal, the attorney who defended her husband in the Monica Lewinsky case. One of these emails, dated April 2nd, 2011, reads in part, Gaddafi's government holds 143 tons of gold and a similar amount in silver. This gold was accumulated prior to the current rebellion and was intended to be used to establish a pan-African currency based on the Libyan golden dinar. This plan was designed to provide the Francophone African countries with an alternative to the French franc. In a source comment, the original declassified email adds, according to knowledgeable individuals, this quantity of gold and silver is valued at more than $7 billion. French intelligence officers discovered this plan shortly after the current rebellion began, and this was one of the factors that influenced President Nicolas Sarkozy's decision to commit France to the attack on Libya. According to these individuals, Sarkozy's plans are driven by the following issues. So why is France going in and fucking bombing Libya? Well, they're doing it because they have a desire to gain a greater share of Libyan oil production. They have a desire to increase French influence in North Africa, to improve Sarkozy's internal political situation in France. He wanted to provide the French military with an opportunity to reassert its position in the world. And he wanted to address the concerns of his advisors over Gaddafi's long-term plans to supplant France as the dominant power in Francophone Africa. Conspicuously absent is any mention of humanitarian concerns. The objectives are money, power, and oil. Other explosive confirmations in the newly published emails are detailed by investigative journalist Robert Parry. They include admissions of rebel war crimes of special ops trainers inside Libya from nearly the start of the protests, and of al-Qaeda embedded in the U.S.-backed opposition. What you don't say, it's like the usual playbook. Key propaganda themes for violent interventions are acknowledged to be mere rumors. Parry suggests they have originated with Blumenthal himself. They include the bizarre claim that Gaddafi had a rape policy involving passing Viagra out to his troops, a charge later raised by UN Ambassador Susan Rice in a UN presentation. The first Iraq war, the soldiers were taking Iraqi soldiers out of incubators and throwing them on the ground to die. the Gulf of Tonkin, the explosion of the USS Maine. There's always some fucking bullshit like this. He's passing out Viagra's to his troops. They're raping everyone, guys. Know what we got to do? We got to bomb that country to oblivion and make it so there's open slave markets and destroy all their infrastructure and take all the weapons there and pump them into another country and give them to extremists who want to do violence on people based on their religion. We should do that. So Perry asks rhetorically, so do you think it would be easier for the Obama administration to rally American support behind this regime change by explaining how the French wanted to steal Libya's wealth and maintain French neocolonial influence over Africa? Or would Americans respond better to propaganda themes about Gaddafi passing out Viagra to his troops so they could rape more women while his snipers targeted innocent children? Bingo! Toppling the global financial scheme. Gaddafi's threatened attempt to establish an independent African currency was not taken lightly by Western interests. In 2011, Sarkozy reportedly called the Libyan leader a threat to the financial security of the world. How could this tiny country of 6 million people pose such a threat? First, some background. It is banks, not governments, that create most of the money in Western economies, as the Bank of England recently acknowledged. This has been going on for centuries through the process called fractional reserve lending. Originally, the reserves were in gold. In 1933, President Franklin Roosevelt replaced gold domestically with central bank-created reserves, but gold remained the reserve currency internationally. In 1944, the International Monetary Fund and the World Bank were created in Bretton Woods, New Hampshire, to unify this bank-created money system globally. An IMF ruling said that no paper money could have gold backing. A money supply created privately as debt at interest requires a continual supply of debtors, and over the next half century, most developing countries wound up in debt to the IMF. The loans came with strings attached, including structural adjustment policies involving austerity measures and privatization of public assets, among other things. I want to build a base in we're going to build a base there. Next time this vote in the UN is up, they get you with the IMF debt and then you're bent over a barrel. That's how they get these countries. After 1944, the US dollar traded interchangeably with gold as global reserve currency. When the US was no longer able to maintain the dollar's gold backing in the 1970s, it made a deal with OPEC to back the dollar with oil, creating the petrodollar. Oil would be sold only in US dollars, which would be deposited in Wall Street and other international banks. The petrodollar is what makes America so strong, but it also is what makes America so weak. In 2001, dissatisfied with the shrinking value of the dollars that OPEC was getting for its oil — OPEC is a collection of oil-producing countries — Iraq's Saddam Hussein broke the pact and sold oil in euros. Regime change swiftly followed, accompanied by widespread destruction of the country. In Libya, Gaddafi also broke the pact, but he did more than just sell his oil in another currency, as these developments are detailed by blogger Denise Ryan. For decades, Libya and other African countries have been attempting to create a pan-African gold standard. Libya's Gaddafi and other heads of African states had wanted an independent pan-African hard currency. Under Gaddafi's leadership, African nations had convened at least twice for monetary unification. The countries discussed the possibility of using the Libyan dinar and the silver dirham as the only possible money to buy African oil. Until the recent U.S. NATO invasion, the gold dinar was issued by the Central Bank of Libya. The Libyan bank was 100% state-owned and independent. Foreigners had to go through the CBL to do business with Libya. The Central Bank of Libya issued the dinar using the country's 143 tons of gold. Libya's Gaddafi conceived and financed a plan to unify the sovereign states of Africa with one gold currency. In 2004, a Pan-African parliament laid plans for the African Economic Community with a single gold currency by 2023. They were running out of time, the West. African oil-producing nations were planning to abandon the petrodollar and demand gold payment for oil and gas. That is a huge, huge problem for the U.S. and the West. Showing what is possible. Gaddafi had done more than organize an African monetary coup. He had demonstrated that financial independence could be achieved. His greatest infrastructure project, the Great Man-Made River, was turning arid regions into a breadbasket for Libya, and the $33 billion project was being funded interest-free without foreign debt through Libya's own state-owned bank. So they created a whole monetary system where the West can no longer do neocolonialism to them. But they also, quick aside, North Africa used to be the breadbasket of Europe. Rome was fed with African grain in the ancient times, in the classical period. So beyond the gold dinar, beyond the oil, I also think there is an interest into making sure this region was not turned into a breadbasket once again. That could explain why this critical piece of infrastructure was destroyed in 2011. NATO not only bombed the pipeline, but finished off the project by bombing the factory producing the pipes necessary to repair it. Crippling a civilian irrigation system serving up to 70% of the population hardly looks like humanitarian intervention. Rather, as Canadian professor Maximilien Forte put it, in his heavily researched book, the goal of the U.S. intervention was to disrupt an emerging pattern of independence and a network of collaboration within Africa that would facilitate increased African self-reliance. That is at odds with the geostrategic and political economic ambitions of extracontinental European powers, namely the United States. Mystery solved. Hillary Clinton's emails shed light on another enigma remarked on by early commenters. Why, within weeks of infighting, did the rebels set up their own central bank? It's strange, right? This suggests we have a bit more than a ragtag bunch of rebels running around and that there are some pretty sophisticated influences. I have never before heard of a central bank being created in just a matter of weeks out of a popular uprising. It was all highly suspicious, but as Alex Newman concluded in a 2011 article, whether salvaging central banking and the corrupt global monetary system were truly among the reasons for Gaddafi's overthrow may never be known for certain, at least not publicly. Well, that was true until the emails were leaked. There, the matter would have remained suspicious but unverified, like so many stories of fraud and corruption. But for the publication of Hillary Clinton's emails after an FBI probe, they add substantial weight to Newman's suspicions. Violent intervention was not chiefly about the security of the people. It was about the security of global banking, money, and oil.
I mean, that is the land of unconfirmed videos. We came, we saw, he died. Did it have anything to do with your visit? No, I'm sure it did.
So, Saudi Arabia is willing to sell some of its oil in the yuan, it looks like. So is this the end of the petrodollar? Does this mean American imperialism is dead? Is the empire going to be in free fall within a couple of years? I don't know, but it doesn't bode well for how things are shaking up right now. Once again, we're seeing China overtake us on the world stage. I think a multipolar world is a good thing. But I also think that the United States is only going to act more and more belligerent as the years roll on now. This is very dangerous. We are, saber rattling with Russia, and now it looks like the linchpin of the value of our dollar is about to be undermined by one of our greatest allies, Saudi Arabia. And it looks like they're turning to our greatest rival of China. China.
Let's say
China.
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 China. China. China. China. China. China. China. China. China. You go over to China. 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 You take China. 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 I love them. China. China. China, China, China. I have to have my China. China, China, because China, 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 China now, China, China. You know, China. I know China very well. China, 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 China.
You need some levity in times like this. I mean, it looks like the world's about to end, but at least he said China a bunch of times.
Dylan! You son of a bitch.